let's talk a little bit about how the virus is transmitted. So what we know now is still evolving. As I said in the beginning of this podcast, this is a novel virus. We are all learning. We are all trying to share valuable information. There are a couple of things that are important to note here, however. It's not clear whether this is droplet or aerosol. And what that means is that it can be spread just by breathing in the same room as someone else. It looks like it could be respiratory droplet, but perhaps not aerosol. Aerosolization of a virus means it can get onto much smaller particles in the air and can travel much further. Droplet precautions, generally speaking in medical school, mean you have to be much closer to someone for it to be a problem, and that it's not as infective across distances. What we know now is evolving, but it appears that this is probably a droplet, but not an aerosol spread problem. That's a good thing because aerosol is much wider distributed. You can get something aerosol from someone being in the same room. A droplet transmission would probably have to be much closer to someone. But then there is the problem of fomites. What the heck is a fomite? A fomite is our fancy medical word for what happens when someone touches their mouth, touches their nose, and gets a piece of the virus or a virus, many virus particles on their hands, and touches something else. They touch a table or a desk or their phone or a shopping cart at the grocery store. That's a fomite. The virus can live outside of our bodies for variable amounts of time on various surfaces. So there's been a lot of discussion about how long can the virus live. Some viruses that we're aware of, like HIV, don't live outside of the body very long at all. They're dead almost immediately when they're outside of our body. But these viruses, coronaviruses, and this is probably what makes things like the flu and common colds so much more effective, is that they can stick around on fomites. And I'll talk about which are probably the most effective fomites in a moment, but I want to show you guys a chart of a study that was recently done. Many of these studies are preprints. They haven't been peer reviewed because it's all coming out so quickly, but nevertheless, this study is pretty interesting. I think it's a preprint from the New England Journal of Medicine. You can see it here. I'll do the screen share. This is essentially the amount of time a coronavirus lives on different surfaces. The red graphics here are COVID-19, which is SARS CoV2, which is what we're dealing with now. The blue graphics are SARS CoV1, the original SARS infection in 2003 and other years. And you can see that the titers of the populations of the viruses decline rapidly on copper. So what people are noticing is that copper doesn't last very long at all. Cardboard can last up to 24 hours. Steel can last up to 24 hours. Plastic can last even longer. So you can see these graphs, these curves are very different between these things. What we know, we're not touching a whole lot of copper. Mostly what we're coming in contact with are things that are synthetic surfaces like a desk, a phone, which are probably on the order of cardboard, steel, or plastic. So it's pretty reasonable to imagine that this virus is going to be on a lot of surfaces that we touch. This is the reason for hand washing. So it's not that we can't go out and do things that we must do. If you have to go to the grocery store to get food, which is an essential part of a human life, then you could either wear gloves, or if you don't wear gloves, you can sanitize the cart before you touch it with a wipe, and we can talk about what will kill the coronavirus. Many things will kill the coronavirus. It's fairly fragile because it's an enveloped virus. Remember, it has that lipid membrane around it. Or you can wash your hands when you get home. I would recommend sanitizing the cart before you even touch it at the grocery store, or sanitizing the cart before you touch it, because we are likely to touch our face even while we are touching our cart in the grocery store. The other thing is that if you are a significant amount of distance away from people at the grocery store, the transmission rates appear to be lower. So the social distancing thing now is being talked about as 6 feet. So in your family and your loved ones, yeah, you can be within 6 feet of them, but if we're in public spaces, it's probably prudent to be about 6 feet from other people, which means you may not want to go to a crowded yoga class for a little while, and we can talk about how much time this is. You may not want to be in a big group of people at a concert. I think most people are realizing this. You may not want to be in a crowded room with people, and if you're going to touch things, use gloves or use sanitizer. It sounds draconian, which is one of my favorite words, draconian, but this is how we slow the spread, and we can talk about why when we get into talking about flattening the curve and the long-term implications of lots of people getting sick quickly with the coronavirus overwhelming the healthcare system. But I think that knowing what surfaces it can be on basically helps us understand that if we're touching anything outside of our home, we should be wiping it down. If we go out in public, you can use a mask, but you probably don't need to. In fact, the mainstream recommendations that I am seeing now are to not use a mask unless you are sick. The mask can actually act as a fomite. And if you touch the mask with your hands, then you can transmit the virus to your face.